Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar today, COVID-19 Survival Panel, whereby we're going to look at business advisory in the COVID world. We have Mark Holton with us from Smith Inc, who's going to be talking on that, and Trent Butler from Trent Butler Consulting is going to be talking about 7 steps to marketing success. So it's my pleasure now to introduce you to Mark Holton, the Director of Smith Inc Proprietary Limited. Mark's going to continue the presentation that he started a few weeks ago on business advisory in a COVID-19 world. How are you today, Mark?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Thank you and welcome. I'm just switching across there now and you're on air.
Thanks, Pete, very much. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the second part of a presentation I started a few weeks ago on the things we need to consider in a business advisory sense in a COVID-19 world. Okay, just to refresh a little bit what we looked at last time and what we're going to look at this time. Last time we had a bit of a look at the need for business advisory, what a lot of firms are currently doing through the COVID period and planning to do as we hopefully move out of the COVID situation, and also the types of services that clients, I know from experience, desperately want in their businesses and rely on us upon delivering those services. Today's taking it a little bit differently. Today's looking at what systems and processes and also people resources you need to get under control in your accounting firms to be able to successfully offer advisory services, both in a piecemeal, but more importantly in an annuity fashion. I'd also go a step further to say, creating the right systems and processes will allow you to create a business advisory division in your firm, and also to focus heavily on the strategic advisory model, not so much the transactional. I'm a big believer we should be offering strategic advisory services first, getting to know what the client wants, getting inside their head, working out where they want their business to be and how to get them there, and also who the hell's going to do it as we go. And then moving to transactional advisory, which I define more so in the use of dashboards, systems, processes, KPIs and the like, not the other way around. When we were last together, we spoke about the accounting industry needing to be more deliberate in promoting their advisory services to their clients and not waiting for others to do it. By others, I mean people like banks. When the client goes to ask the bank for money and the bank comes back and tells them they need additional information, 9 times out of 10, they'll come back to us. In my mind, that information should already be at hand, at least in our firm, not have to be created from the ground up. We've got to start tracking advisory services separately on the firm's P&L and integrated into the workflow management of the firm. It should be a separate cost center per se, or division, call it what you will. It should have separate job codes. We should be setting budgets and KPIs around what we're looking to achieve in the advisory component of an accounting firm, not just for compliance-based services. If this is important enough to do, it's important enough to be measured. We've got to get better at that. The budgets we create need to be realistic. They need to be achievable. They need to have the right systems, processes, and people resources behind them. Otherwise, measuring KPIs through them would be a total waste of time. But the KPIs we're looking to measure here, whilst they might have a compliance flavour, are very much different in their application. We've got to start to look at activity, contacts, how many proposals we're generating, success measures, and everything else that goes with a good supplementary service offering in an accounting firm. I'm a big believer in not linking it with compliance services unless the client specifically requests it or you know they prefer it that way. If a client wants to see one proposal, one system, one fee, hopefully paid in advance on a monthly retainer type basis, give it to them. But if they don't have that preference, I'd separate those 2 key services in their mind, because one is a service that has to be done. If they don't do it, then they get hit on the head by the government. Advisory is not that. It doesn't have to be done. It's not regulated. It's more voluntary in nature. So we've got to get that marketing message right. I also believe don't look backwards, look forward. Advisory services look forward, compliance looks backwards. Leave that for compliance. Simply putting yesterday's numbers into a scorecard, putting it in front of a client, I've got no doubt will impress them on day one. I've got strong doubt about your ability to continue to do it on day 3, 4 and onwards. And don't give it away for nothing. This one staggers me. I've been doing advisory work in my accounting firm and then helping other firms do it now for the best part of 23, 24 years. And I still see firms say, what if we do this for nothing? What if we practice it? Well, if you're adding value, take the leap. Value your services and bill it accordingly. But to get all this stuff right, you desperately need a business advisory implementation plan. And you need to follow it and you need to commit to it. And you need accountability to it, guys. No plan, no structure, no execution. Or if you do happen to execute it, do you get longevity? Do you get annuity-based advisory? Are you still doing it for small business clients 2, 3 years down the track, or once only and billing them once? We've got to get the plan in place. We also spoke last time about the different advisory services you could offer, and I throw that up there for one reason, just to remind you a little bit about all the things from financial health checks to business value indications. And again, we looked at the stages that are involved in the provision of that service as well as pre-lending assessments. But there's one right down the bottom, and that's recovery services, directly below something which I think is an absolute no-brainer in this industry, and that's grant management services. Look at the BIZTOOLS grant management system. If you can help a client pay your fee or part of it, there is no better way of funding what you're looking to do. A lot of firms say to me, I'm not sure the client will pay. Then make it easy for them. Find a grant that can help them. Okay? But recovery services, we are coming out of COVID. A lot of businesses, even those that are currently receiving JobKeeper, have to be at least 30% down. So what's your plan to help those clients get back to where they were before COVID hit? What's your plan to be able to get that 30% or 40 or 50% back? How long will it take? Who's going to do it? When's it going to be done? Who's going to hold them accountable to the plan? Do they have a budget and cash flow to be able to create the actions that are necessary to create recovery? I'm a big believer this could be the single biggest opportunity we have in this game to get advisory services in front of clients and develop a relationship model where they look for more services in the future. So there's an awful lot of ways to deliver it. The real question is how to deliver it. And a lot of firms say to me, okay, this sounds great, but where do I start? I have a system, and it's part of the Smith Inc. model called the enabler system. It's the 7-step process to success. And let me outline to you very quickly what those 7 steps are. The first thing you've got to do is prepare your firm for success. If that doesn't happen, forget the rest. If you're lacking capacity, it's got to be addressed. If you don't have the right staff, the right systems, the right processes, that has to be addressed. If you're struggling for time, that has to be addressed. Because everything inside my bones tells me that if you don't do that, 3 to 7 won't happen. 2, you've got to unlock the client's needs. You've got to get inside their head. You've got to find out exactly what they want, what they need, and then create a disturbance by showing them where they want to be in the future, where they are today, and where the gap is. I'm a big believer advisory services are gap management. Just you've got to help them set the gap and measure the gap, then fill the gap, and then reanalyze where they are. We'll then move to analysing their performance, and that's when you bring in your dashboards and the like, not up front, then. Where we start to look at their strengths, their weaknesses, when we start to look at their future goals and plans. And then 5, 6, and 7 are post-selling. Help them do it. Service their additional needs, and then generate new opportunities at step 7. 5, 6, and 7 are dependent on you, okay, delivering 2, 3, and 4. 2, 3, and 4 are dependent on you getting your act together at step 1. So let's for the day just take step 1. And let me now show you the 3 most common excuses I get from accounting firms as to why they started this pathway and stopped, or they never got off the ground, they failed to implement. Okay? It always comes back to a lack of something, and the number 1 reason is time. They're lacking time. That has to be fixed because it won't fix itself. What they're really saying to me is I lack the commitment to change the model or the commitment to resource the model properly, and capacity, both within my firm and within the key individuals, including me as partner, is a real issue. If that isn't fixed, the whole thing will grind to an immediate halt. You've also got to get the right client to start with. I'm a big believer accounting firms, in their head or through other mechanisms like a CRM, break clients up into the old A, B, C's and D's. I look at an A-class client as a client that simply wants to grow. They're great payers. They listen. They're good sources of revenue for the firm. They don't BMW, which is bitch, moan, whinge. I don't like BMW clients. They're looking for advice and they're after a partnership. Guys, they are the ideal client to start with, but they're also one of the hardest ones because they're already doing it pretty well. The B class might be missing one A class behaviour. Maybe this client has always been a great payer, but for the last 6 or 12 months, they've been pretty slow. There's a reason for that. They're struggling. Their cash flow needs support. And I'll tell you something, they're a dash more desperate than the A-class clients to get that support. So that's where I target. The C's don't really want to go near them, and the D's, well, I reckon they're the emotional vampires anyway. They're the ones that'll suck your blood all day and never want to pay for the privilege. They're the ones who don't want to grow. They're a lousy payer. They fail to listen. They've got shocking revenue opportunities. They BMW your bill, not after advice because that costs too much money, and they're not looking at a partnership. So why would I even contemplate going near them? In fact, they're the reason I don't have capacity in my firm. I've got to be looking at this and doing it smarter. I've got to be looking for, maybe the first 3 clients we can do this with, and then start to think about the next half dozen you can do it with. You don't have to get them all. Maybe the focus should only be ever the top 20% of your clientele. But you've got to start to think, where do I start? Because the first 3 or so are confidence builders, and not done well, they're confidence breakers. And I've seen that go astray many, many times. What else do we need to get our mind around? Pretty simple stuff, like I need an implementation system. That's what I do. I build that for accounting firms. I need some confidence. That comes through training, support, practice. I have to want to move from my comfort zone. Compliance is comfortable. We all know that. Okay, if I don't want to move from it, then good luck getting anyone to do advisory. They're the wrong people. I need the right staff. I need a practice champion. And I've got to train and develop the key staff over and over and over again. And all of that should be part of a proven implementation plan. That's the key catalyst for success. So, to get this moving in a firm, there are 4 key things we need to do in order. The first thing we need to do is implement what I call the trusted advisor model into the firm, and I'll show you that in one moment. The second thing we've got to do is get your infrastructure right, as in who's going to do what, when, how. What services are we going to offer? How do we explain them to a client in a manner they see as beneficial? How much do we charge for them? How do we price it? Very hard to go to market if you don't know what you're selling, how to explain it, how much it costs, and what the benefit is. We've got to build a price book, per se, of advisory services with simple, easy to understand explanations that we build into proposals, and prices that hit the market but are not too cheap that we can't get them up, and not too dear so that it breaks the market before we have a chance. We've got to get that right first. We've then got to create an engagement model and offer for the client. You've got to get inside their head and find out what's important to them, for starters. I use a process called a witty, which I can talk about on another day, but it tells me what's important to the client before I engage with them. So that when I do engage with them, I'm in a much more ascendant position than going in there cold. I also want to come out of that engagement meeting with a customised, individualised proposal for the client and get them to sign it. At what point I'll worry then about how to deliver it. You know the mistake I made in the early days, guys? I went straight to step 4. Let's get some software. Let's deliver advisory. I listened to someone that said, okay, take this software, you'll become an advisor. What I now know 20 odd years later is there's not one bit of software that turns you into an advisor. That's a personal skill that you have to develop. Software is an aid to deliver. If you haven't got clients interested, because you haven't approached them, you don't know what they want, you haven't put a proposal to them because you haven't engaged them, okay, then that's the sort of software you've got to be looking at first. That's the sort of systems, processes, and model you've got to be looking at first. Not going out buying dashboards and bringing it back and not knowing what to do with it. That's the mistake I made in the early days. I don't want to see you guys make that mistake. So we've got to get those 4 key things in place. So let me finish off, because I've only got 20 minutes, with what I call the trusted advisor model. In my mind, we need to have some receptacle in our firms to record clients, well, we sure as hell got those, prospects and suspects. In other words, a pipeline. And that pipeline that stores all this data needs to be sitting as part of the trusted advisor office. I think every accounting firm needs a good CRM, a client relationship management system, because it keeps track of clients, prospects, suspects on the way in, and it keeps tracks of opportunities, actions, outcomes, and projects on the way out. And believe me, when you're doing a dozen advisory projects, different things for different clients, without that sort of mechanical type structure behind it, things slip through the cracks. So the client comes to the trusted advisor office. That's the accounting firm. We then take a project management role, guys. So we find out what's important to the client. We find out what keeps them asleep, which is an overused cliche, but it's true. Anyone that's been in small business knows that. We find out what they need in the future. We find out what they want their business to be worth, and a whole host of other things. Then as the project manager, we then enlist the services of, below the line, the accounting firm. And that's an internal service. If they need tax and compliance work, consulting, self-managed super, FP, succession, bookkeeping, and your firm offers that internally, then we internally, okay, support the project. If we don't have those skills below the line, then we have to go to external advisors above the line. And in this model, you might need a good lawyer, a good solicitor to help you with estate plans, wills, enduring powers of attorney and the like. You might need a good broker for lending services. You might need HR, IT support if you're not offering that internally in your firm. And as I've found out over the years, some things below the line end up going above, some things above the line end up coming below the line as your firm matures and your service models evolve. But one thing I will say, as the project manager, you manage the whole project. What's the project? The client. What's the need? What they need. We don't just say, here's a good solicitor, off you go. You meet with the client as the project manager with the advisor. You know exactly what's going on, when it needs to be done, how it's going to be done, what it costs. And all that information is stored in one receptacle called the Trusted Advisor Office, or your CRM, as the track and trace process. We've got to get this model right. The first tool you should be looking for, the first software application for advisory, is a good CRM. And there's many of those out there at the moment. Happy to talk to anyone about that offline. So Pete, I'm coming to the end of where I am. The one thing I will say to anyone who listens to these recordings, I'm more than happy to spend 45 minutes through a teleconference webinar, these days through Zoom, and do a complimentary business advisory assessment with you. We'll talk about your firm's realistic numbers and future goals, what risks and issues you currently have, like capacity, like staff, like systems, like issues on sales. We'll look at your personal and business aspirations, and we'll talk about the pathway to advisory success using a very structured divisional model of getting the right systems, processes, and people. If anyone's interested, just contact me through ESS Business Tools or through Smith Inc. So, with that in mind, I'd like to leave you with this challenge. And before I do pass back to Pete, I'd love firms to take the challenge of doing advisory. I'd love them to develop their practice revenue models without increasing the percentage of compliance work. You can do that if you want, but that's not the end goal. And more importantly, like I've had over the years, have a lot more fun while you do it. That's ultimately why we're in business, is it not? And Pete, pretty well a couple of seconds over 20 minutes. I'll pass back to you.
Thank you very much, Mark. That was a very good presentation. I was really interested in your comment about the recovery services because of the current situation for a lot of businesses around Australia. Their turnovers are down at least 30%. There's a great opportunity there, isn't there?
Even if the firms just could get a list of every client, small business that's getting JobKeeper.
Yeah, well, they should know that.
You know they're 30% down.
Yeah, and they're the ones to start talking to.
Go and have a cup of coffee. It's not magic.
Hmm.
You know, I've had people say, how do you get into a cup of coffee meeting? Oh, I ring them and ask them.
You've got to invite someone. Yeah.
They don't want to go to coffee. I'll take them down the pub.
Hmm.
And we'll have something other than coffee. And we'll just have a chat. There's no script. You can't do it wrong. Very hard to do it wrong if the client doesn't know what you're doing.
Yeah. And
just find out what their worries are.
Yeah.
Then come back and create a proposal that addresses it.
That's right. Yes. So that's the challenge to everyone. I think, are you online, Trent?
I am, Pete. I've been taking notes and listening frantically.
Yeah, Mark's got to go to another meeting. So have you got anything you want to just raise just for a 1 or 2 minute discussion now before he goes?
No, it's mostly just a comment. One thing that really stood out to me was the 20% of businesses, and really just focusing on those as being the ones that actually need this service rather than the 80% that don't. You know, Peter, we were talking earlier and talking about the fact that a lot of accountants are doing work for very little fees with some of these firms, and I think we'd all be better served, not just accountants, but in business generally, if you think twice about taking on work that's got a fee sort of at the, you know, less than $1,000 a year, for example. I think if you're doing that, you're locking yourself down and you're no chance of doing a service like you're talking about. So anyway, yeah, just an observation that stood out to me.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Mark.
Pleasure, Peter.
Thanks,
and we'll catch up next week. Okay.
Thanks, Mark.
Catch you later on, eh?
Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.
Okay. Enjoy your meeting. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm just going to switch back and we'll introduce you first, Trent.
Yeah, sure.
And, we can probably go from there. You're there. I have a slide, but we won't worry about the slide. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our listeners to Trent Butler, Director of Trent Butler Consulting. And Trent's going to talk to you about the 7 steps to marketing success for a professional services firm in the COVID-19 environment. So over to you. Thanks, Trent.
Great. Thanks for the intro, Peter. Is there any way I can, here it is, share my screen? Let me just pull that up. How's that? Is that coming through okay?
Yeah, it's through there now. We got your slides up. Yes.
Brilliant. All right. So I think thanks for pairing me with Mark's presentation, Peter, because I think it's really a strong 1-2 punch.
Yeah.
Particularly for.
That's a pity he had to go off to another meeting, but anyhow.
Yeah, it is. It is. I would have liked him to sit through this so we could have a good discussion at the end, but maybe that's something we can do offline. But yeah, look, I think this is certainly in the context of Mark's presentation. This is certainly the next step where you can actually go about actually attracting clients along the path that Mark was suggesting. And so in that vein, I thought I'd just talk through the 7 steps of marketing success for professional services firms. And so if I just present my slides. So normally, Peter, I'll do my best to stick to time, but normally I'd run a poll here and ask what's the number one way people on the line actually go about getting new business, and I'll put people out of their misery because I'll cut to the chase. We know it's over 80% of small business owners claim that their main source of new business is referrals. So all the new clients coming in, generally 82% or more, are going to be from those referrers. Now that's an interesting statistic in itself, but consider this: over 80% of consumers of professional advice will visit a firm's website before deciding to actually become a client of the firm. Or 61% of mobile searchers are more likely to contact a local business if they have a mobile-friendly site. And so what these are telling us is that even though referrals are still important and are always going to be an important component of building a practice, how people buy and consume advice is radically different. And what they're now doing is they're doing their due diligence and checking out their online presence, or at least more than 4 out of 5 of them are anyway, before they decide to make a purchase. And so where marketing in professional services was pretty straightforward and linear, what we're now seeing is it's pretty much all over the shop in terms of, you know, they might have a conversation with their colleague or associate about your practice. They might then do some research, they might Google, they might find some competitors in that process that are doing something similar to you, to which they spoke to their friend about in the first place. They may then look for reviews. They may also look for what the quality of your website's like. Are you a thought leader in solving their particular problem or not? And so really, and you know, just to throw some more numbers at you, and we all know that this is happening. We don't really need to see it in a chart, but the number of Google searches has exploded really from the early 2000s, and a similar trend is happening with social media platforms in terms of them going up as well. And so all of this is creating an interesting buyer dynamic, if you like, whereby the consumers of advice can get information really easily, and they can self-diagnose to some extent what their problems might be through the power of this thing called the internet. And I guess the point I'm trying to make and really drive home is that that is changing the way people purchase professional services advice. And so to address that, or to come up with that, really we need a framework for marketing success for professional services firms. And I think it's a 7-step framework, a little bit similar to what Mark's got with his advisory development model. But I think there's 7 steps really for any firm that's serious about making sure they've got their online presence and just their organic growth strategy right. So it starts with strategy. So there's no point talking about tactics until a strategy is developed. And that really comes down to looking at our points of difference as a practice. And that's really where some of the concepts Mark was talking about, and Peter, what you do with ESS, can really assist, because not every accounting practice, for example, is going to be offering those sorts of services. And so it really feeds in nicely at that point from a marketing perspective, because it really does give the practice a point of difference that can then make all of this other marketing stuff work even better. Separately, and secondly, is once a strategy is defined, I think we now need a website that really builds and conveys trust. And so even if most of your clients aren't going to come to you through a website in the first instance, it might be through a referral. We know more than 4 out of 5 are going to be on that website, checking you out, doing their due diligence at some point. And so that thing needs to be on point and have core elements that really make sense, which I'll talk about shortly. Now, the other sort of 2 to 6 I won't touch on, but in this presentation, just due to time, but they are important once those 2 core elements are in place. So a content platform to demonstrate your authority. We call it making sure you're a visible expert, making sure people in your market can actually see and perceive you and trust you as an authority in your particular area of specialization. And then from there, it bleeds into the tactics. So we've got SEO, social media, and some wonderful things, particularly on LinkedIn, are happening at the moment that we're seeing happening with our clients. Email marketing, I think, has a place, and also pay-per-click advertising. And so the 2 things I want to focus on today are strategy and the website. And so by strategy, we're talking about a differentiation strategy, identifying our ideal clients, message and story. And really the uncomfortable truth is for most professional services firms is that marketing these firms is actually pretty hard. And the reason it's hard is because most firms actually lack meaningful differentiation from the rest of the marketplace. And so if you can put yourself in a position of, say, a bookkeeper who is really at a service offering level no different to every other bookkeeper that's out there, and potentially every other bookkeeper that's also overseas, this is just an example, you can see that there's real challenges to marketing that when you're one and of the same. And so the first thing to do within any practice is to really understand what's our point of difference and what's a meaningful point of difference. And a meaningful point of difference, in our view, it's not a logo, it's not a well-positioned office or a good-looking website. I mean, these things can absolutely play a role in the client attraction process. But really, when we're talking about something that's meaningful, we want to be known for something that's meaningfully different based on our expertise. And so you might have a perspective on a particular area that's different. So maybe you have a view about the market or a certain segment of the market that not everyone in that market's going to agree with, but those that do will value that difference highly. Maybe you have a depth of insight that's deeper in some areas. And so, for example, if you're competent with, cash flow modeling, and you have experience and understanding and you have the tools and trainings around that, then you can offer that as a point of difference to your clients. Or maybe just through the passage of time, you've developed expertise in certain core areas that maybe make you different than other practitioners. And also over time, you may have developed intellectual property, either yourself internally, or perhaps you've invested in your practice and got tools, worksheets, insights that you can use to better serve your clients. And then that can then be leveraged into a marketing strategy to help attract more of those clients. And so, the elephant in the room, as I said, is this isn't easy or perhaps immediately blanketly obvious. And frankly, this is my view as to why many firms just put this in the too hard basket. It's very easy to just push this to the side. And then particularly when, if things get busy, it's certainly easy to push to the side. But the good news is pretty much every firm I do talk to, they do have a particular area of expertise that if it's not first apparent, it is buried somewhere within the practice. Just a couple of examples just to further illustrate what I mean by this in the marketplace. And these are observations that I've seen either from my own clients or others in the marketplace. So an accounting firm that has decided to forgo compliance work entirely in order to pursue financial management and CFO advisory services. So to some compliance-based firms, that's shock horror. But for others in the marketplace, they are actually taking that and building a strategy around that. And that's really a point of difference because not everyone in the marketplace is doing that. A financial planner who has a unique client onboarding process based around cash flow modeling. So they've developed a unique cash flow model that can demonstrate the value of net assets at a particular point of time in the future. That's an example of IP differentiation, and we built a little strategy around that. And it goes on. So an accounting practice who works exclusively with hospitality businesses, they're obviously having a bit of a challenging time at the moment, and there's definitely pros and cons to each of these strategies, particularly if you're focused. It's a point of difference, but you're obviously not immune to issues that are going on within those markets. And also maybe a tax practitioner who has a deeper understanding of tax planning advice specific to medical professionals, or a local practice. I don't want to rule out the fact that there aren't local practices doing extremely well, those with existing client bases typically that are doing a roaring trade with regards to compliance. I think having a geographical focus in and of itself can be a strategy. And now whether or not the technology is going to take over the validity of that tried and tested approach, I'm not sure. But I think definitely that's still working. And so if that is the case, it's still building out who the ideal clients might be. So is it entrepreneurs or high net worth individuals? Now, this is nothing new. And Peter, we've spoken about this before, Mr. Meister, on attracting new clients. Some simple principles can guide the choice of marketing tactics. The first and most important is the raspberry jam rule. The broader audience you attempt to reach, the weaker is the impact. So rather than paying a little attention to a lot of prospects, it's generally always better to give more attention to a smaller, well-selected audience. And so the reason I like this particular book and this particular quote by Mr. Meister is it was published over or nearly 30 years ago, which is pre-internet. It's pre all this new marketing stuff. It's a tried and tested principle. And that's really when we're talking about a marketing strategy, what needs to be in the front of mind. It's something that's proven and something that has withstood the test of time. So the key takeaway from this is you want you and your firm to have a greater knowledge and perspective in a few areas, which perhaps has less appeal to the broader market. So again, we're not appealing to the 80% that Mark mentioned previously, but perhaps that's the 80% we don't care about anyway, and it's not going to move the needle forward, but has a far higher appeal and value to a smaller segment of the marketplace. And so just to really ram this point home, this is a strategy issue, not a tactics issue. And I do see particularly a lot of smaller firms, a lot of 1 and 2 partner practices with a limited budget to devote to this. They do get hung up on the latest and greatest tactic. Someone might tell them they need to be doing SEO and blogging. The next person might come along and tell them Facebook is where it's at. And really, I think what makes the most sense is to have a plan or a strategy in place before diving into tactics, because the strategy is always going to inform the tactics and not the other way around. So how do you start thinking about an appropriate strategy for your practice? Well, I'll give you some initial high-level insights in terms of how I think about this. There's really 2 frameworks that I sort of look at. So there's these forces: the market's problems, needs, and desires. There's your firm's background, client base, existing IP and skills. And then there's the skills that you can learn. So you may not have the skills already in-house to meet the opportunities that you see within your client base, but that's totally fine. That's where the Mark Holdens come in. That's where the Peter Towers of ESS BizTools can really add value and help you to do that. And I think that it's a marrying of these 3 things that really makes your firm's organic growth opportunities stand out. Now, if I had to bet on what the most important one, or what the most important factor in this framework is, in my view, it's the market's problems, needs, and desires. So there's no point in building something that no one wants. And so really, if you have the luxury of an existing client base that you can pick out, and you are interested in providing an advisory type service, then I think using that the existing clients that you have really does make a lot of sense before building out a full-blown marketing plan around that. But certainly, if you do have a point of difference that speaks to advisory services, which is the world that Mark was speaking about, and that's already proven, you've already got some runs on the board, then I think you owe it to yourself, you owe it to other clients out in the Australian business marketplace that perhaps aren't getting that quality of advice. I think you owe it to them to actually put your hand up and say, we're going to take a few more of these on, because we've actually been a front runner in this process. And so I think that's really where, when I said before, Peter, Mark, and I are a 1-2 punch in the sense of if there are practitioners that are doing that, then and have runs on the board in that space and can back up what they're claiming to do, I think really then it makes a lot of sense to do everyone else in the business community a favor and go and find and help others.
Yeah, yeah.
So no one wants what we have or we sell. They want their problems solved. And so that's sort of really drumming home the point I was making. The second framework, and this is particularly for larger firms, I like to take practices through this that have an existing client base, is to sometimes just dive in and look at our existing clients that are profitable. So again, probably putting those C and D to the side, really looking at our A and Bs and saying, well, what do they have that's consistent? What do they have that's already working? What services are we providing those particular firms that's making them so profitable and ideal? And then building a strategy and a point of difference plan around those characteristics. So you don't necessarily, well, I'm a little bit more passive than Mark in the sense of saying you don't necessarily need to reinvent your whole wheel if you don't want to. I think if you want to and you have the appetite for it, that's absolutely fantastic and should be done. But if you don't, then I think that's another way of going about slicing this problem, is to look at what's actually working in the practice and building a plan to get more of those. Now, the other thing I'll quickly touch on, and this is quite a long subject in itself, and I want to respect everyone's time. Peter, I know I've only got a few minutes left, but building a website that converts visitors to customers. And so, as we said before, over 80% of consumers of professional advice, they will want to visit that firm's website before deciding to become a client. And so they may not directly come through the website and pick up the phone and reach out to you, but what they are now doing, and you know this is true because you're probably doing it yourself when you're looking to consume or purchase anything really, is you're getting recommendations, but you're also taking the ball in your own hands and doing a bit of your own due diligence and research. And so that's why this website and online presence piece is just so important to the process. Now, the website has a lot of jobs. So it's got to convey a promise. It's got to tell a bit of a story. I think more and more whereby, you know, a way of actually being different and not being seen as a commodity is really to tell your story. You know, a lot of practices out there have wonderful teams. They have a wonderful ethos internally. And so we want to make sure we're attracting clients that really meld in with that story. And so actually telling that as part of the website journey, I think really makes a lot of sense. Obviously listing our core offerings and services, personas. So who are the 3 or 4 or 5 types of clients that we want to work with? So if we want to work with, and we've mapped out in our strategy, we really want to work with just high net worth individuals or maybe law firms, if that's a particular focus of ours. We want to call those people out on the website and on the homepage so that we're clearly demonstrating that we have some competence and expertise in working specifically with those people, and perhaps not calling out or doing our best not to call out those D clients that Mark was referring to. I think trust signals, so you know, people that are members of the Institute, the CPA, IPA, whatever can convey trust. Testimonials, I think, have a massive role to play today in terms of conveying social proof. You know, people, particularly for local practices, they want to know that other people have worked with that practice and had a good experience. And so I think testimonials, if you don't have them already, there needs to be a mechanism of collecting those as well as putting them onto the homepage of the website. Video, again, is also becoming important. Again, we want to know who are we working with? What's the practitioner like as part of the process? And so having video on the homepage of a website is becoming very common because it conveys a point of difference and it conveys a human, that this is actually a person that sits behind this brand that we'll be working with. Now, again, a promise to solve a problem. So this is just one example of a site, an entire team of accounting specialists for less than the cost of an in-house bookkeeper. So again, this is front and center. It doesn't say, hi, we're an accounting firm, we complete tax returns. It's actually a point of difference. And it's what we call a core marketing message that conveys that point of difference front and center of the website. Again, some recommendations. So again, putting referrals on the website and making sure they're in center, calling out those personas, so the types of people that we actually work with in our practices. And then again, some calls to action. So keeping in mind the website is playing a role within the buyer journey. We want to make sure we have a strategy and a plan in place for actually taking the people that visit the site, and what's the next step we want them to take? Do we want them to jump on the phone? Do we want them to learn our process? And having call to action buttons that actually get them to, you know, to register and take the next step in the process. So very quickly, in wrapping up, this all can be tracked. This is, as an accountant myself, where I sort of geek out a little bit on this stuff. We can track, you know, organic, direct, paid referrals in quite a data-driven way to know what's working and what's not, what needs to be changed, and what can be scaled up or down. And so, as I said, really, I've only scratched the surface, but that's basically at a very high level of framework for attracting, developing a point of difference for the practice, and then attracting the ideal clients that we actually want to be working with. And so, Peter, I'd love to, as part of this process, offer your subscribers or anyone who's listening a complimentary website review. So this is actually a bit of a pretty deep dive. We're actually going to, before we sit down together, spend an hour or so on your site and on your online presence, diving through and essentially auditing some of these key things to see how you stack up. And then part of that process, we're having a 1-hour session with you one-on-one to basically share our findings. Now, we've run a lot of these strategy sessions, particularly with accountants, in the last 12 months. We're no longer doing these for free, but we do have a 100% money back guarantee. So we've never had anyone take us up on that. But if you don't feel as though you've received value from that process and that you haven't received at least 5 times the value or cost of what we charge, we're happy just to give you a refund. So we're not necessarily doing it for the money, but rest assured we want to make sure we're working with the right people as part of this. So yeah, that's it, Peter. Happy to answer any questions. If anyone on the line has any, or if you have any, more than happy to stick around.
Okay, thanks very much, Trent. Yeah, my firm obviously is using your services, and we've been very impressed with your approach. So for people watching this video today, if you really want to get a significant inroad so you can differentiate your services and even start thinking about what services are you offering? How are they differentiated? I would really recommend that you talk to Trent about this. Trent, another thought occurred to me as you were talking. You know, I've been around this game for a few more years than you,
Yeah.
probably a lot more years.
That's a fact.
But when you look at what we've got today, and I think at times some accountants might sit back and say, oh, it's all tough. Well, it is, but go back 25, 30 years ago, no one had social media, no one had websites, no one had anywhere near the software packages. Xero wasn't thought of 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And there was nowhere near the communications that are now available with mobile telephones and all the fancy phone systems, iPads, etc., that people can use.
Yeah.
We've also had a liberalisation of how we can help clients. You know, 25 years ago, there were various rules in the professional bodies which prohibited advertising, for argument's sake, and self-promotion. I can recall a couple of practitioners being heavily disciplined by a professional body because they had the audacity to put an ad into a local newspaper that they were going to be visiting the following week and were happy to see prospective clients. That was a no-no in those times. So thankfully, we can now advertise as a profession. So there's been a lot of changes. And the other thing is, I think we've got a far more vibrant business community in Australia. The real challenge for accountants is how do we as a profession make sure that accountants continue to be the trusted advisor in that space, and that this role's not taken by someone else who becomes the key advisor in non-compliance areas. I don't see anyone fighting accountants for the compliance work, but if accountants aren't careful, and already there are other people trying to do the non-compliance work. You got any thoughts on that, or as a younger generation person?
I have a world of thoughts. There's a lot to talk about, and there's a lot in that. I think, yeah, you are right. It's a new world in the sense of, and I think, you know, the technology and the globalization of things has really driven that home. I think it's actually, it's never been easier for a practice now that has the right attitude and drive to attract the right type of client because of all of these things. The barriers to do this are quite low relative to what they would have been. And you mentioned advertising being banned not too long ago. Well, thank Christ that that's changed, because otherwise we'd all be part of, you know, would be this all within probably working for a big four or something, and we'd be doing that for years and years. I don't think, otherwise there'd be just no way to branch out from that, and they would just dominate the whole market. And God knows how painful that would be. So
yeah, I think, was in some respects.
Yeah. So thank God that whoever was responsible for that has seen the light, and there's now avenues to step out and be seen. Okay. So I think that's a thing. I think, you know, Mark made some great points before about what holds firms back. I think there's a couple of things. It's the technology and the tools and everything is definitely there, and a way to get to market's definitely there. There's probably a couple of things that come to mind in terms of what restricts firms. One is the mindset, and two is time and capacity.
Yep.
So the mindset is that typically come, you know, the principals that are making these decisions, and my clients, most of my clients would be part of this group, is they've come from a particular space whereby, you know, this is how we did things around here. And I think people that go out on their own into practice, they take some of that baggage with them, and that doesn't change overnight. You can't get rid of that in light of all of the tools and technology that's sitting there. So that's the first piece. The second issue, I think, is it's really around having too many clients and not charging appropriately for the service, because I think that really ties people's practitioners' hands behind their back. And we want to do good work. We all love getting more clients, but if it's not the right client, it's punishing the practice from moving forward. So the model I like to work with is, for firms that are taking this seriously, is always be looking to cycle out clients that aren't a fit and be replacing them with those that are a better fit. And it's not our responsibility as a profession to take the weight of the business community on our shoulders and solve all their problems. I think this is just my personal view. I think the accounting profession generally just does far too much, particularly from being the people that bear the burden, so to speak, from the ATOs. What they need to be doing from a compliance perspective, and I think they need to charge appropriately. And if they did charge appropriately, I think the dynamic between that relationship would be very different. So I'm all for what Mark said in terms of perhaps just considering forgoing a large portion of the business community, because you're running a business, not a charity.
That's right. And Mark also identified, and I think the tools, the products approach that you've got will fit in very nicely with this, and that is, who of your clients are currently accessing JobKeeper? They're a prime group to start your marketing strategy to later today or on Monday. Don't leave it for another 6 weeks or 8 weeks. Plenty of people are going to hear what Mark had to say today from this webinar, and they some of them hopefully will take this on board. So thank you very much, Trent. And you've got your offer there, and if people want to contact us, we'll pass them on. So I'm just going to take this back now and just finish off, and we will go from there if I can get it back.
Pleasure. Thanks again, Peter. Thanks for having me.
It's all right. That's great. Thank you. Okay, everyone. So we're going to go through the wrap up. I hope you've enjoyed today's session with Mark Holton and with Trent Butler. COVID-19 update. Just a reminder again that the new coronavirus SME guarantee loans are available from 1 October. That's the $1 million maximum loan. You have until the 30th of June next year to apply, or your clients have. Please bear in mind you're going to need to prepare for your clients' business plans, budgets, cash flows. Obviously, the financials for 30th of June 2020. This is a loan that's 50% guaranteed by the federal government, and there is no specific security requirements. So it's a great loan if you want to go down that path, but don't forget there's also capital raising that companies can do. There's been a fair bit of publicity in the last couple of days about the new JobKeeper reference date, which is now 1 July, but it's effective on a one-in, all-in requirement. So that means that all of your eligible team members have to be in this JobKeeper program, and you have until the 31st of August to comply with that requirement to register those people, and that's Monday. So I'd suggest if you've got some clients that haven't done this yet, that you should be getting on the phone to them this afternoon and fixing it up for them. Action plan. What are you going to do after listening to Mark Holton and Trent and myself today? I just want to remind you again that the CommBank's very good report on the accounting industry, which they call Accountants Market Pulse, was released in late June. It was based on surveys undertaken in May, and those accountants who were surveyed, which were drawn from all segments of the Australian accounting profession, identified that business advisory service would be the prime practice area in the next 6 to 12 months. What's your accountancy firm doing about it? You've received some very strong suggestions today for Mark Holton as to what you can do. And Trent Butler has given you some clues as to how you can identify those people and get that message across to them. What else do you need? Well, you can talk to us about having the products and services which will enable you to deliver those services without you having to spend 300 or 400 hours now in writing a system, but you can get started on Monday, and please think about it. The ESS BizTools teams identified what we're calling our premier business advisory services products to assist you to help your clients in 2020-21. These are pre-prepared product packages with notes, with papers, with material for your clients, with videos, all ready to go. Survival in difficult times, chief financial officer services, business funding for SMEs, looking at crowdsourced funding, early stage innovation companies. Industry specific advisory, which is looking at making sure the charge out rates that your tradies are using marry up with their productivity, the markup they're obtaining on the materials that they purchase. And at the end of the day, the profit that they included in a budget forecast is going to be achieved. Innovation journey from research and development to capital raising. There will be a lot of people who during this lockdown period, particularly in Victoria, and greetings to our colleagues in Victoria, all the best. We are thinking of you, and we hope that you can get back to normal business operations as accountants and business people in the near future. But how many of your clients have been sitting at home and they've wandered down to their shed down in the backyard? I think you can still do that in Victoria. Obviously, I assume it's within 5 kilometres, so they can go down to their shed or their computer. They may have been working on research and development projects. What are they going to do with them? Do they understand the research and development incentive rebate that they can obtain? They have to incorporate into a company, so they have to be fairly serious to start going down this path. What government support is there? Well, there's a $1 million grant called the Accelerating Commercialisation Grant that is issued every month that can assist them to commercialise. And if they need to raise capital because they haven't got any money, they could look at trying to qualify as an early stage innovation company. And we have a product package that gives you all of that material so that after you go through the training package, you will be able to deliver that type of services to your clients and prospects. And if you need backup support, I can give it to you. Just contact me and we will come to an arrangement. And accelerating grants. Mark referred to grants. Mark's a great fan of grants and our grant package. We've got a package which will assist you to identify grants. We'll give you a letter to go to your clients advising them, and then we'll give you the outline of what's required to submit a grant application. And grants are great for accountants because you can earn fees from helping your clients. So if you'd like to talk to us, it's free, there's no obligation. We can give you a 30-day trial. Give me a telephone call, 1-800-232-088, and I'll talk about your particular circumstances and show you how ESS BizTools can help you. Or you can have a free trial. You can go to our website and register for a free 30-day trial. Alternatively, if you want me to just have a discussion with you about what needs to be done to bring your firm into this concept of being able to gainfully offer business advisory services, then give me a ring, please, and I will be happy to talk to you. Your investment, 60 minutes of your time, and we'll do a Zoom meeting. So to arrange that, you can send me an email, please, peter@essbiztools.com.au, and we'll agree on a date and a time to have that conversation with you and your colleagues. You can have 20 people in the room, or you can have one. Doesn't really matter. We can probably have more than 20. You can have 50. Our next webinar in this series is on Friday, the 11th of September at 12 noon. And our presenters are Dale Crosby, who's a director of High Tech Soft Touch, who's going to talk about accountants' relationship with SME clients post the 30th of September. It's when JobKeeper was originally meant to finish, and obviously it's going to be phased down. And I'm going to be stepping you through the process of helping clients get ready for crowdsourced funding equity raising. So you can register for that webinar by going to our website, ESS BizTools, and then click on to webinars. and the webinar is free. If you want more information, please go to our website, ESS BIZTOOLS, or contact us. So thank you very much, Trent, for your participation today. And we will be forwarding on any details of people we get who are interested in having a one-on-one discussion with you. And thank you for Mark Holton, who's already left to go to another board meeting. Good luck in your firm. And obviously, if you've got any questions, please send them through to us. Have a great day. Goodbye. Goodbye, Trent.
Thanks, Peter. Talk soon.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
And I hope everyone has a great time. So we're finishing now.